she lies in the hush of her final evening. The roads that once bent beneath her boots now exist only as memory. No crowds, no monuments, just breath, and the quiet weight of a life that refused to be small. History remembers men for conquering land, but tonight we remember the woman who carried it. She lies in the quiet of her last Gippsland night. The world around her has softened. The sharp edges of forest and mountain have receded into shadow, and the years, those long, unforgiving years, have thinned into something gentler. What remains is the steady rise and fall of her breath, the breath of someone who spent a lifetime moving forward, even when the road did everything it could to stop her. Somewhere beyond the walls, the land listens. Before the name carried weight, before stories followed her into inns and camps, before men paused mid-step to watch her pass, there was only a girl named Agnes Davidson, born in 1822 in the damp, crowded margins of Glasgow. Her world began small: stone walls, cold mornings, 6 children sharing space meant for fewer. Her father worked land that demanded more than it ever returned. Her mother kept order where order was always under threat. Hunger was not dramatic, it was ordinary. Work was not heroic, it was survival. From the beginning, Agnes learned a truth the frontier would later confirm. Strength was not something you waited to acquire, it was something you practiced every day. Records do not tell us much about her childhood. History rarely does when the subject is poor, female, and unremarkable, at least by the standards of the time. But we can imagine her hands, already roughened by chores. We can imagine the smell of damp earth, the sting of wind through narrow streets, and the constant awareness that life offered no guarantees. By the late 1830s, change pressed in from every direction. Glasgow was swelling, industry crowded out breath, opportunity narrowed for families like the Davidsons. And then came the stories, whispered at first, then spoken with conviction. Tales of land so wide it seemed unreal, a place where effort might finally meet reward. Australia. In 1839, the decision was made. What little the family owned was packed away, the rest was left behind. Agnes was 17 when she stepped onto a ship bound for the other side of the world. The sea did not welcome them. Months passed in sickness, spoiled food, and cramped quarters. The Atlantic rolled endlessly, indifferent to fear or hope. Many did not survive such crossings. Agnes did. And in that endurance, something hardened quietly within her. When land was finally sighted, relief did not arrive as joy, but as release. In April 1840, the Davidsons reached a raw settlement near Port Albert. It was barely a city. Timber huts, mud streets, smoke curling from fires that burned more optimism than certainty. This was not a promised land, it was an unfinished one. Agnes went back to what she knew: dairy work, early mornings, heavy labor. The rhythm of survival returned, only now under a harsher sun. Nearby lived a man named Buntine. He knew loss intimately. A child buried, a wife taken by illness. The colony had given him little except grief and endurance. And in that shared language of hardship, something quiet formed between them. He was older, worn, but steady. They married in October 1840. There was no romance worthy of legend, no sweeping declarations, just 2 people choosing companionship in a world that did not forgive isolation. Together they tried to build something, a dairy, a foothold, a future. The land resisted. Returns were small, poverty lingered, nights were long, yet hope survived in fragments, in the crackle of a fire, in plans spoken softly after exhaustion had settled. Then came whispers of a place farther east, Gippsland, unexplored, forested, dangerous, but promising. Agnes was pregnant when they decided to go. The journey into Gippsland was not a road so much as a suggestion, a narrow passage swallowed by forest. The lantern they carried cast a trembling circle of light that seemed small against the vast darkness ahead. This was the moment where many would turn back. Agnes did not. If this story already feels different, if you sense that this is not just another history lesson, but a life carved from grit, this is the moment to subscribe. Not because of what's coming next, but because stories like this rarely get told the way they deserve. The forest closed behind them. Every step forward erased the possibility of retreat. The trees did not care who they were. The land did not offer reassurance. It only asked one question: how much are you willing to endure? Agnes answered without words. By the time they reached the edge of settled land near Port Albert, her child was born, a son, new life in a place that barely acknowledged its own existence. He would be spoken of as the first white child born in the region, a title that carried wonder, not celebration. Agnes held him beneath a flickering lantern, the walls of their crude shelter breathing with the wind. Outside, the forest waited. She did not know then that this land would demand more of her than Scotland ever had, that it would take her husband, test her body, and force her into roles no woman was expected to survive, let alone master. She only knew one thing: the road was not finished with her. And in the darkness beyond the hut, the tracks that would one day carry her legend were already forming. Gippsland did not open itself to the Buntines. It pressed inward. The forest here was not decorative, it was dense, wet, and watchful. Trees rose so tightly together that daylight struggled to reach the ground. The soil beneath them was dark and heavy, clinging to boots as if reluctant to let go of anyone who dared walk across it. Agnes learned quickly that survival in this place required more than effort. It demanded awareness. Each morning began with listening to the birds, to the wind moving through leaves, to the silence that often meant danger was close. The land spoke constantly, but only to those who paid attention. They built their hut north of Port Albert with their own hands: rough timber, a roof that leaked when the rain came hard, walls that held back the cold only partially. It was not much, but it was theirs, and it stood on contested ground. This was not empty country. For thousands of years before Agnes arrived, the land had belonged to the Gunai-Kurnai people. Their paths crossed the same rivers, their stories lived in the same hills, their lives were woven into the soil long before settlers ever named it Gippsland. By the time the Buntines arrived, that balance had already been shattered. Violence had moved through the region quietly at first, then openly. Retaliation disguised as defense, expansion dressed as necessity, entire families erased and spoken of only in whispers. Agnes lived within this shadowed reality. There is no record of her questioning it, no diary entry condemning it, no testimony defending it either. History offers only silence, and silence on the frontier often meant survival. Hugh worked wherever he could, brick-making, helping travelers, doing whatever labor might bring in coin. Agnes tended animals, grew what she could, and learned the rhythms of the seasons with an intensity born of necessity. Their son grew stronger, then another child came, then another. Mouths multiplied faster than income. To ease the strain, they opened a rough roadside stop, later known as the Bush Inn. Travelers stopped to eat, rest, and exchange news. It was here that Agnes began to be noticed. She did not speak much. She watched. Men passing through commented on her strength, her posture, the way she moved through work without hesitation. Some laughed at the idea of a woman managing such a place in a land so unforgiving. They stopped laughing once they stayed the night. Hugh, compassionate by nature, began helping the sick and injured. With no formal training, he did what he could, cleaning wounds, offering shelter, easing pain. Locals began calling him Dr. Buntine. It was half jest, half gratitude. But the frontier is not kind to the gentle. Illness crept into Hugh's body slowly, almost politely. At first it was fatigue, then breathlessness, then days when standing required effort he no longer had. Agnes noticed before anyone else did. She said nothing. Instead, she worked more. She worked because children still needed feeding, because debt still hovered, because the land did not pause for grief, and because fear, real fear, had begun to take shape in her chest. She knew what losing Hugh would mean. By the late 1840s, poverty was no longer temporary. It was constant. No matter how hard they worked, the numbers never tipped in their favor. The inn barely broke even. The farm yielded just enough to survive. And then the rumors began. Gold. First in whispers, then in shouting, then in a rush that tore men from their homes and flung them into the hills with picks and hope. Victoria changed almost overnight. Settlements exploded, supplies vanished, roads filled with desperate movement. Agnes listened. Where others saw chaos, she saw a pattern. Goldfields needed food, tools, equipment, everything. And everything had to be carried. Men were already making money hauling supplies, dangerous money, grueling money, but money all the same. Agnes looked at Hugh, then tired, fading, then at her children, then at the road. If you're following this story right now and you can feel the decision forming before it's spoken, this is the moment to subscribe, because what she chooses next doesn't just defy expectations, it shatters them. Women did not take up the carrying trade, not because they were incapable, but because the work was brutal. Teams of massive bullocks, wagons weighing tons, tracks that collapsed under rain, slopes that killed careless drivers, bushrangers, fire, isolation. Men died doing this work. Agnes did not romanticize it. She calculated it. She understood animals. She understood land. She understood endurance. And most importantly, she understood that waiting for rescue was not an option. So she made a decision that history would later struggle to process. She would drive bullocks. There was no ceremony, no announcement. She learned by watching, by asking questions others dismissed, by observing the behavior of animals stronger than any human, and learning to command without cruelty. She dressed for survival, not propriety. Shortened skirts, heavy boots, leather leggings, practical layers, the kind of clothing that scandalized polite society and saved lives on the road. When she first took the reins, there were laughs. They stopped when she didn't fail. Her first major run came in 1851, 1 ton of cheese, half a ton of butter, a route that crossed the Great Dividing Range toward Bendigo's goldfields. The mountains did not care that she was a woman. They tested her anyway. She walked beside her team, stock whip cracking, not in anger, but instruction. She slept beneath open skies, ate simply, rose before dawn. Every mile earned with patience and precision. When she arrived, the goldfields took notice. not because she demanded attention, but because she delivered. She sold her goods, watched men fight over supplies, observed the frenzy, and understood something crucial. This road would keep her family long after the gold ran out. By the time she turned her wagon back toward home, Agnes Buntine was no longer simply surviving. She was becoming something else entirely, and the land was about to push back harder than ever. The bush was quiet in the way that made experienced travelers uneasy. Not peaceful, not resting, waiting. Agnes felt it before she saw it, a dryness in the air that clung to the throat, a heat that did not belong to the sun. Even the birds had withdrawn, leaving the forest unnaturally still. She slowed her team. The bullocks lifted their great heads, nostrils flaring. Animals always knew first. Then came the smell. Smoke. At first it was thin, almost polite, a suggestion drifting low along the track. Agnes had seen smoke before. Campfires, distant clearing burns, the harmless signals of human presence. This was different. This carried urgency. Somewhere ahead, the bush was burning. In colonial Victoria, fire was not an emergency, it was a sentence. One spark could become a wall of flame faster than a man could run. Winds shifted without warning. Embers leapt ahead of the blaze like scouts sent to trap the unwary. Entire teams had vanished in minutes, swallowed by heat and smoke. Agnes did not panic. She read the land. The track narrowed, the forest thickened, the wagon creaked beneath its heavy load. Turning back would be slow, dangerous, possibly impossible. She pressed forward. The smoke thickened. Ash began to fall like gray snow. The bullocks grew restless, hooves striking earth harder now, sensing the change in the air. Agnes cracked the stock whip, not in fury, but command, urging them on. Then she saw it, flame licking through undergrowth to her left, low at first, hungry, alive. The wind shifted, and the fire answered. It rose, branches ignited in sudden bursts, leaves curled black. The forest filled with sound, the roar of combustion, the crack of splitting wood, the rushing breath of something that did not intend to stop. Heat slammed into her back. Agnes knew then that she could not outrun it. She abandoned the wagon. This decision, so often misunderstood later, was not surrender. It was calculation. She cut the bullocks loose, shouting over the roar, pulling them toward a patch of ground already scorched. Burnt earth held no fuel. It was the only refuge. Sparks landed on her clothing. She beat them away with her hat, her hands already blistering. Smoke clawed at her lungs. Visibility collapsed into swirling darkness lit by orange glare. The wagon caught fire. Canvas ignited first, then timber. The load collapsed inward, exploding in a burst of embers that scattered like stars. Agnes threw herself flat onto the burnt ground, face pressed to earth, breath held shallow, her body shielded by smoke and instinct. Above her, the fire passed. Minutes stretched into something shapeless. Heat pressed down, ash fell. The world roared and screamed, and then, slowly, moved on. When the noise faded, she lifted her head. The forest was gone. Charred trunks stood like blackened pillars. The air shimmered. Her wagon was nothing but twisted metal and glowing ruin. Her hands were burned, her clothes scorched, her hair singed. But the bullocks stood, alive, shaken, soot-covered. Agnes rose unsteadily. She did not cry. There was no time for it. She gathered what remained, treated burns with whatever water and cloth she had, rested the animals. Then, astonishingly, she continued. Word of the fire spread faster than she did. travelers spoke of the woman who walked through flame and emerged standing, of how her practical clothing, mocked by many, had saved her life, of how she chose survival over cargo without hesitation. Her reputation changed. Before, she was capable. Now, she was undeniable. If you're still listening at this point, if this moment has stayed with you, this is where subscribing matters, because stories like this were almost lost entirely, and what comes next pushes her legend even further into impossible territory. Not long after the fire, Agnes turned her attention toward a place few drivers dared enter: Walhalla. The gold town lay buried in steep mountain folds, accessible only by narrow tracks that clung to cliffs like afterthoughts. Supplies were scarce, hunger common. Many believed heavy wagons could never reach it. Agnes believed otherwise. She guided her team down slopes that forced men to dismount in fear. Wagons slipped, wheels screamed. One wrong angle meant death. She walked every inch. When she arrived, miners stared. They had gone days without proper food. She did not hesitate. She slaughtered one of her own bullocks, an animal she had raised and relied on so they could eat. It was not generosity born of sentiment. It was frontier logic. Men survived. The town breathed again, and Agnes became the first to bring a fully loaded bullock wagon into Walhalla. The impossible had been done. From that moment on, her name traveled ahead of her. Inns fell silent when she entered. Drivers watched carefully. Some admired her, others resented her. All respected her. But legend has a cost. The road took its toll. Her body hardened, her temper sharpened. She carried pistols now, not to threaten, but to survive. She intervened when she saw cruelty, sometimes violently, sometimes controversially. She was not gentle, she was necessary. And through it all, Hugh faded further. Illness had hollowed him, his strength waned. Agnes worked longer, traveled farther, carried more weight, both literal and unseen. The fire had not broken her, but it had marked the turning point. From this moment forward, Agnes Buntine was no longer merely enduring the frontier, she was shaping it. And soon, the road would ask for something she could not fight. The road did not announce Hugh's decline. It revealed it slowly. At first, it was the pauses, moments when he sat longer than usual before standing, the way his breath shortened after tasks he once completed without thought. Agnes noticed everything. She always had. But noticing did not mean stopping. It meant adjusting. She worked more. The wagon still needed moving. The children still needed feeding. The land still demanded its price, whether grief was paid or not. Hugh tried to hide his weakness, as men of the frontier often did, wearing effort like dignity. But his body no longer listened to pride. Illness had settled in him like a quiet tenant, unwilling to leave. In the evenings, Agnes would return from the road with dust still clinging to her boots, only to find him sitting in silence, staring toward the window as if listening for something just beyond reach. She said little. She touched his shoulder. She understood what words could not fix. The frontier did not make room for rest. When Hugh could no longer manage the farm or the inn, the weight shifted fully to Agnes. She rose earlier, returned later, slept less. The children helped where they could, their small hands learning responsibility long before childhood had fully passed. Agnes did not complain, but the road, her ally for so long, now carried a second burden. Each journey pulled her farther from home, even as home needed her more than ever. She walked between two demands that could not both be satisfied. On the track, she was unbreakable. At home, she was human. She began timing her journeys carefully, shorter runs, faster returns, but money was never enough. It never had been. She drove when she was exhausted, walked beside the bullocks with legs that ached deep into the bone. And still, Hugh faded. The illness took his voice first, then his appetite, then the strength in his hands. Agnes washed him, fed him, sat beside him at night when his breathing grew uneven and the darkness felt too large for one person to face alone. She had crossed mountains without fear. This was harder. There is no heroism in watching someone you love disappear slowly. No victory in endurance here. Only presence, only staying. If you're still with this story, if you feel how quiet this part is compared to fire and danger, this is the moment to subscribe, because this is where strength changes shape, and what comes next redefines everything. Hugh died without drama, no sudden collapse, no final speech, just a breath that did not return. Agnes was there. She held his hand. She did not call out. She did not beg. She understood death as she understood land, inevitable, unyielding, and indifferent to resistance. Afterward, the house felt too large. The silence moved differently. Objects carried weight they never had before. Hugh's tools leaned unused. His chair remained where he left it. The inn fell quiet. The children moved carefully, sensing the shift without needing explanation. Neighbors came. Words were offered. Food left at the door. Hands rested briefly on Agnes's shoulder. She accepted none of it as comfort. Grief did not arrive all at once. It settled in layers, in the absence of routine, in moments when she reached for someone who was no longer there, in the nights when the wind moved through the trees and there was no one beside her to hear it with. But the road did not stop. Agnes returned to it not because she wanted to, but because she had to. There was no choice dressed up as courage. There was only necessity. Now she walked it alone. No Hugh waiting at the end. No shared plans. No quiet conversations at dusk. Only distance and the steady rhythm of the bullock's breath. Travelers noticed the change. She spoke less, paused longer. Her movements remained controlled, but something in her had turned inward. She no longer worked to build a future. She worked to maintain one. Years passed. Her reputation grew, even as her world narrowed. Younger drivers watched her with a mixture of awe and unease. She had become something fixed, like the road itself, reliable, dangerous to underestimate, impossible to ignore. At night, beneath open skies, she allowed herself moments of memory. Not regret, not longing, simply remembrance. Hugh's quiet persistence, the early years, the way life had once felt shared. Then dawn came, and she moved again. But time does not negotiate forever. The years etched themselves into her body. Her steps slowed, her hands stiffened. The road, once conquered through force of will, began to ask for patience instead. Agnes sensed it. She did not fight it. And somewhere ahead, beyond the long tracks she had mastered, another change waited, one not forged by loss, but by the unexpected return of companionship in a form she never anticipated. The road did not end for Agnes Buntine. It simply began to loosen its hold. For decades, movement had defined her. Distance, weight, direction. The steady demand of forward motion had shaped her days and hardened her body into something built for endurance. But time, like the land, reshapes even the strongest paths. Agnes felt it first in the mornings. Rising took longer now. Her hands, once quick and sure, lingered before closing around familiar tools. The stiffness faded as the day progressed, but it always returned by nightfall, settling deep into bone and joint like an old ache that refused to be forgotten. She did not complain. She adjusted. Shorter runs replaced long hauls. She rested the bullocks more often, walked less, rode when she could. What once would have felt like concession now felt like wisdom. The road had taught her many things. One of them was when to stop forcing what no longer needed proving. Gippsland was changing. Tracks widened into roads, rough clearings grew into towns. The gold rush frenzy softened into industry and routine. Places that once depended on her arrivals now received supplies more easily. Younger drivers took routes she had carved with patience and grit. Some recognized her, most did not. Agnes watched this without bitterness. She had never worked for recognition. The road had been her responsibility, not her audience. Still, there was an emptiness that came with being less needed. She spent more time near home now, tended what remained of the land, helped neighbors quietly. Her children, grown and scattered into lives of their own, visited when they could. Their presence brought warmth and reminders of time's passage she could neither stop nor regret. Then came someone unexpected, John McCallum. He was not young, not ambitious, not chasing anything the frontier still had to offer. Like Agnes, he carried years in his posture and understanding in his silence. He had known loss, he had known work. He did not arrive seeking rescue or offering it. They found something steadier, companionship without urgency, conversation without expectation, a shared rhythm shaped by experience rather than hope. Agnes did not soften dramatically. She did not become something she was not. She simply allowed space for another presence beside her, someone who did not demand strength but respected it. They married quietly. No celebration, no spectacle, just two people acknowledging that the road was easier when not walked entirely alone. If you've stayed with this story this far, through fire, loss, and endurance, this is the moment to subscribe, not for what's loud, but for what's rare, because history almost never pauses to honor the quiet chapters. Agnes stepped away from the carrying trade, not with ceremony, but acceptance. The bullocks passed to other hands, the wagons moved on without her, and the road, once her proving ground, became something she watched rather than walked. Yet she remained a presence. Locals still spoke her name with respect. Not always with accuracy, stories grow in the telling, but always with acknowledgement. She had crossed what others feared, done what others claimed impossible, lived in defiance of boundaries no one had bothered to question until she ignored them entirely. She did not correct the myths, she let them exist. Her body aged, her pace slowed, her world narrowed gently, not violently. Evenings were quieter now, fires burned low. The land she had fought and mastered rested around her like an old adversary turned companion. When she looked back, not often but honestly, there was no single moment she named as triumph. There was only continuity. She had stayed. That, in the end, was her greatest act of resistance. And as her strength faded, something else took shape. Not in her body, but beyond it, recognition, not from governments or institutions, but from memory, from the stories told at tables, from the names attached to tracks and crossings, from the way people spoke of the woman who drove bullocks over mountains as if she were part of the land itself. Agnes did not live to see statues raised. She lived to see survival become legacy. And in the quiet years before her death, she understood something few ever do, that history does not always reward those who deserve it. Sometimes it simply remembers them if someone insists hard enough. Agnes Buntine did not announce her leaving. She did not fade beneath banners or ceremony. There were no crowds waiting to witness the end of a life that had once carried entire towns on its back. The world she had helped carve no longer needed to pause for her passing. That, perhaps, was the final truth of the frontier. She lived her last years quietly. The strength that once commanded bullocks across mountains now measured itself carefully, conserved for small movements and steady breath. Her hands, scarred, burned, shaped by decades of work, rested more often than they labored. She watched the land change. Tracks she had walked became roads wide enough for wheels she would never drive. Towns rose where forest once closed in. Names appeared on maps, some familiar, most not. The frontier softened, slowly forgetting the cost of becoming settled. Agnes did not resent this. She had never mistaken herself for history's favorite. She had done what was required when it was required, nothing more, nothing less. When illness came for her, it did not come violently. Her body, long disciplined by hardship, yielded with the same calm it had carried through danger. There was no fear left to summon, no unfinished argument with the road, only reflection. She remembered the fire, the smoke, the moment she pressed her face to scorched earth and waited for flame to pass. She remembered Hugh's quiet endurance, the early hunger, the long walks beside animals that trusted her more than they feared the road. She remembered Walhalla, the impossible descent, the faces of men who had not eaten properly in days, the weight of the knife when she chose to slaughter her own bullock so others could live, not as heroism, as necessity. Agnes Buntine died in 1895. The novice was brief, unadorned, accurate in its facts, and limited in its understanding. She was buried without spectacle. The land absorbed her, as it absorbs all things eventually. For a time, that seemed to be the end. But stories do not always end when lives do. They linger. They attach themselves to places. They pass through generations unevenly, distorted, incomplete, sometimes misunderstood, but never entirely erased. Drivers continued to speak of the woman who took the mountain road. Children heard her name without knowing why it carried weight. Locals pointed to routes she had opened and spoke of her as if she belonged to the land itself. Yet for decades, official history hesitated. Her story did not fit easily. It unsettled categories. She was not a pioneer wife waiting at home, not a symbol polished for celebration, not a rebel seeking attention. She was competent. And competence, especially in a woman who asked for nothing, often makes institutions uncomfortable. Recognition came late. A place in historical records, a name preserved, a quiet acknowledgement that the roads of Gippsland and beyond were shaped not only by ambition, but by endurance. Agnes Buntine was not exceptional because she defied expectations. She was exceptional because she ignored them entirely. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause rather than rush, this is the final moment to subscribe. Not for more noise, but for more stories that history almost lost simply because they were lived without spectacle. Today, her legacy exists in fragments, in the routes she walked, in the example she set without instruction, in the truth that survival itself can be an act of resistance. She did not seek to be remembered, but remembering her matters, because progress often rests on shoulders that never asked to be noticed, because the frontier was not built only by those who claimed land, but by those who carried life across it when no one else would. Agnes Buntine did not conquer the road, she endured it. And in doing so, she proved something history still struggles to accept: that strength does not need permission, that courage does not require applause, and that some of the most important lives are lived not loudly, but relentlessly. The road remembers her. Now, so do we. Agnes Buntine, 1822 to 1895, was one of Australia's most remarkable frontier figures, bullock driver, pioneer, and survivor. Her story challenges how history defines strength, gender, and legacy.